All right, in this one, we're going to pick apart and look at the chords for Boards of Canada's Everything You Do Is a Balloon. So this track is a little tricky, actually, because it's got some a little bit denser chords, which is obvious because that's what we're talking about right now. Um, it also, well, one of the reasons I like Boards of Canada is because they do some denser chords. So let's just dive in. Let's have a little listen to some of the track, and then we will pick apart a section of it. Okay, so I looped that last part a couple times because I wanted you to get it in your head. Um, it's pretty much the same chord progression, I think. I haven't figured out this whole song yet. Um, from the whole song. And you can hear as you listen to this song, it's got this kind of like churning chord progression that just kind of keeps cycling through. And if you listen close, you'll hear that it's not our typical chords. It's not 100% the chords we would expect. There's something a little denser going on. Now, we know that when we hear something that sounds a little denser, the obvious thing would be that there's more than three notes in those chords. There's probably four, maybe even five. Who knows? Um, so let's have a look at what they are. Now, this one is a little tricky. So here's the bass line that I hear. And, this is a little bit subjective because when you listen to a song like this, especially something that's got chords like that where they cycle through and there's no really clear bass line, there's no like thing that steps along, at least not in this part. So the bass line could be interpreted multiple ways. So this is the way I hear it. And let's actually chop away this. Let's just focus on this because it's just 2 cycles through the same thing. So let's just do this. There. Because 2 cycles, exact same chords. So this is the way I hear it. Let's hear mine against theirs. So here's a piano playing the bass notes. Okay. So I have figured out. I'm just gonna kind of tell you one of the key crucial things from this track. I figured out that we're in the key of G minor, but we do not get a G minor chord. Now that seems a little strange. Like, if we're in the key of G minor, with everything we've seen so far, we ought to have a G minor chord probably as the first chord. But that doesn't happen here. You could call this a couple different keys, actually. It's a little bit debatable, actually, as a lot of music theory is. You can argue, and people write whole books about, what this chord is in that key and all this other nonsense. I don't care about that. I'm going to just try this in G minor and see how it goes. So let's go over here, kind of outside of our loop here, and let's just write out our G minor scale. So here we go again. Whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step. Okay, G minor. Now, if I go here, so my first root note that I heard is a G. Sounds good. If we try to build a chord on G minor here, it's not going to sound right. So let's do it, just so I can prove to you how not right it's going to sound. Okay, so there's my third, there's my fifth. So let's just hear that. Let's do a little bit of a lead in here. See, it's not quite right. It's something kind of like sits funny, like it doesn't quite feel right. So I don't think it's G minor. I think this is actually the second chord in the key with an elusive bass note. So it's one of those chords over a note, right, that we saw before. So what I hear actually here is an A minor chord. So I'm going to start a chord and build it on A. I'll explain this G in just a second, but let's build it on A. So there's the root, there's the third, there's the fifth, and I hear this note in the bass. So we have this, the way we could write this chord, if we wanted to give it a name, would be A minor. That's what this is. That much of it is an A minor chord over G, right? We've seen this before. So there's a G in the bass, and an A minor chord is our main chord, but there's a G in the bass. Now, is A minor in the key of G? Yes, it is. It's our 2 chord, right? So A, C, and we don't actually have an E because remember the 2 chord is our diminished one. So because of the diminished thing, they've done kind of the trick here of using the harmonic minor scale. So that makes, if you remember the harmonic scale, we can raise our 6th and our 7th up 1. So let's do that here. And that makes for a little bit nicer chords, especially on this 2 chord. So they raised the E, so they're using the harmonic minor scale. So this one's already starting off a little weird because we have an A minor chord over a G, and we're using not the minor key, but the harmonic minor key. Weird, but it makes sense. Now let's try to explain this G a little more. If you remember what I said before when we looked at these chord over, like these fraction-looking chords, that fraction thing where there's a note in the bass that's different, it could be in the chord, but it also might not be in the chord. In this case, it doesn't look like it's in the chord because we have this A minor over G. But let's think about it a little bit more. Maybe that is in the chord. If we say A is our root, here's our third, here's our fifth, what would our seventh be? It would be, there's our sixth, there's our seventh. It would be a G. So this is an A minor seventh chord with the seventh tone, G, in the bass. So we could write that as, we could write it just as A minor seventh. That explains all the notes that are happening right here, because it says the notes that are happening are A, C, E, and G, but the G is in the bass. So we might still write it over G if we wanted to, just to be really clear. But A minor seventh explains the whole chord. So let's hear that now, and we'll see how that sounds. I'm gonna turn the volume of the piano down just a little bit, so we still hear the track a little bit more. Let's give this a little bit more. Okay, that sounds pretty good to me. That's it. So what we have here is an A minor 7. That's the second chord in the key of G, using the harmonic minor scale to explain the two. Now, once again, I'm going to point out, did they sit in the studio and say, hey guys, let's do something in the harmonic minor scale, let's get rid of that diminished chord and let's do this? No, that's probably almost for sure not what they did. What they probably did was sit at a keyboard or a piano or guitars or something, and they figured out a cool sounding chord progression. They don't care that it's a raised 6th scale degree, so they're using the harmonic minor and they're putting the 7th in the bass. They don't care about that, and neither should you when you're writing. But when you're trying to figure these out and you're looking at what other people did, it is handy to be able to say, okay, that's how they did that, so that when you're writing, you can think that way, and you can think, okay, maybe if I put the 7th in the bass, that'll do like a different kind of feel. So we're just explaining what they did. So let's move on to the second chord, C. So let's try just building a minor chord, or a chord, on C. So in the key of G minor, let's see, I'm looking over here and trying to compare. So there's our second, there's our third, there's our fourth, and there's our fifth. Okay? So let's see what we have here. Let's see if this works. Possibly. Let me hear that again. It's not quite right. It's close. I actually think they're doing a C minor chord here. So we're taking that down a half step. Let's hear that. That fits a little bit better, right? So how do we explain this minor chord? Well, we could go back here and say they ditched the alterations to the minor scale and now they're back here. That would explain the minor chord just perfectly. So for the first chord, they bumped it up to get rid of that diminished. And the second chord, they bumped it down. They really only dealt with this note because we don't have the F in there, but typically they go together. So now we're back to the natural minor scale, and that's totally fine. But there's still one thing missing from this chord. If you listen close, there's more to the track. In the track, the chord is a little bit denser. So I'm going to try to add the 7th. and I'm going to see if it works. So G is my root of my key. So if I go up to the 7th, because I can't go up here anymore, I'm just going to cycle back around, start there, and it would be here, A sharp, or a B flat. So let's see how that sounds. Pretty good. Okay. So I'm pretty happy with that, and I'm pretty happy with the way it's arranged, because I hear this as the bass note, so I'm going to leave it just like that. Okay, now I have another G chord. Or G root sounding, is it the same as this chord? Let's find out. Let's put these notes over here and just listen to it and see what happens. Definitely not, right? That sounded all kinds of wrong. So let's get rid of that. So it sounded so wrong, in fact, that I'm just going to get rid of the whole chord, because it's not just one note wrong. That was just the wrong chord. Okay, so that G chord doesn't sound quite right. Let's just try, I'm going to take a hypothesis here that it's the C minor 7th chord again, but rearranged a little bit. So let's just hear this. Okay, that's not bad. Here's what I think they did, though. I think we've got a C minor 7th chord, which we had here. I think we have that again, but it's over G. So let's rearrange it a little bit. Let's take the 7th, which is this A sharp here. Let's move it down an octave. And this G, let's get rid of, because we have it down here again. So we have all the same notes. I just moved them around a little bit. Okay, that sounds pretty good to me. Let's figure out this last chord. So it's an A. Now remember, we had A minor 7 here, but now I hear the root kind of as A. So let's try just building an A minor 7 on it and see if maybe it's just that chord again. So there's my 5th, there's my 7th. So let's try it. Hear it again. I think that's it. What we have here is they're kind of finally giving us the A as the bass note. And this, again, is debatable. I could hear it that way with this G in the bass for this whole thing. That's very possible that it is. I mean, this is just like a very tight mesh of a pretty dirty sound. It's really hard to pick out these pitches. But I think that's what we've got. So let's have a look. Let's walk through this whole thing. So what I think we're in here is this first chord is an A minor 7. And we'll say over G. We don't really have to say that because it's all the same notes, but let's say it so that we're clear that G is the low note. That's the way it's arranged. Then we have a C minor 7, and we don't need to say over anything because there's a C in the bottom of it, and that's assumed. Next we have a C minor 7 again, but this time over G. And again, we wouldn't have to say G necessarily because there's a G in the chord, but it makes it a little bit more clear. We're not saying any wrong notes if we don't say G, over G. So it's there. And then last we have an A minor 7, and we don't need to say over A because A is in the bass unless we do what I just did here, in which case we'd want to say over G. So if I leave A in the bass, I don't need this. If I put the G in the bass, I should say that over G, but I don't have to. Yeah, so that's Boards of Canada. It's a little bit of a tricky one. These denser chords are hard to hear, especially when there's like this kind of distorted sound. So enjoy. Hey everyone, one quick correction to that video that you just finished watching. When we were talking about alterations to the minor scale, I called it harmonic when I should have called it melodic minor, and so I'm very sorry about that. Hopefully you were paying attention, you caught it, and you were like, wait, he's wrong. But if you remember, the harmonic is when we raise just the 7th scale degree, and the melodic is when we raise the 6th and the 7th scale degree. So we were looking at the melodic when we raised both 6th and 7th. We didn't really have to deal with the 7th very much, but we had to deal with the 6th, and there's no version of the scale where you just raise the 6th. In this case, there might be actually in the near future, but actually there will be in a very near lesson. We'll talk about a scale where you do raise the 6th. But for now, in the minor scale, that's what I should have said. So, brief correction. Thanks.